I crashed my Lamborghini Gallardo. Fortunately, I'm okay, but the car is a little bit worse for wear. There would 100% category B this car because of all of this damage, which would mean that it could never go back on the road. And for that reason alone, is why I'm choosing to repair this myself.
It all started with a crash. Mat Armstrong, a self-taught mechanic from Leicester, England, had built his entire reputation on doing things that big car companies said were impossible. He had fixed wrecked supercars, rebuilt engines, and put vehicles back on a road that most garages would have given up on. But nothing he had ever worked on came close to what landed in front of him in 2024. A Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, one of only 60 ever made in the entire world, had been involved in a serious crash in Miami. The front end was completely destroyed. The airbags had gone off. The transmission housing was smashed. The carbon fiber spine that runs through the middle of the car, which is essentially the car's skeleton, had cracked. The insurance company looked at the damage and wrote the car off at $1.7 million in parts alone. That number did not include the labor, the time, or the nightmare of trying to source the pieces. The owner of the car, rather than walking away, decided to buy the wreck back from the insurance auction for $1.9 million. Then he did something that would set off one of the most extraordinary arguments the car world had ever seen. He called Mat Armstrong. He asked a man in a Leicester workshop, someone who had never been to any fancy automotive school, someone who had no official certification from Bugatti, someone who had built his skills through years of trial and error and sheer determination, to fix the most complex, most exclusive road car on the planet. And Mat said yes. What followed was not just a car repair. It became a battle between one determined mechanic and one of the most powerful car companies in the world. And now, more than a year later, the battle has grown so large that it has pulled in Lamborghini, shaken Porsche, attracted billion-dollar investment firms from New York, and forced the entire car industry to ask a question it has never properly answered before: who actually owns a car after the factory sells it? When Bugatti found out what was happening, they did not sit quietly. They acted fast and they acted hard. The company locked the VIN, that is the vehicle identification number, the unique code that identifies a specific car, which meant that no official Bugatti dealer or supplier anywhere in the world could sell parts for that car. They did not just refuse to help Mat Armstrong. They made it almost impossible for him to even get basic parts, including something as simple as a windshield. Bugatti's official position was clear. They said that the Chiron Per Sport was so complex, so technically advanced, and so carefully engineered that it could only be safely rebuilt at one of two facilities in the entire world that had the right equipment, the right software, and the right expertise. They said that an independently rebuilt Chiron posed a genuine safety risk, not just to the person driving it, but to anyone who might ever sit in it or share a road with it in the future. Mate Rimac, who led the company called Bugatti Rimac and who effectively controlled Bugatti's operations, stepped in front of cameras to explain the position. He talked about gearbox housings, about the calibration of airbag deployment systems in cold weather, about the structural integrity of carbon fiber components after a high-speed impact. These were not made-up concerns. The engineering challenges inside a Chiron are genuinely extraordinary. The car has more computing power than most people's laptops. Its systems talk to each other in ways that require specialist knowledge and factory-level diagnostic equipment just to understand. Bugatti's technical arguments had real weight, but the problem, the very big, very public problem that Bugatti had not fully prepared for, was the way those arguments looked to ordinary people watching from the outside. Because when you lock a VIN and block a man from buying a windshield for a car that someone legally owns, the technical detail gets completely lost. What people hear instead is something much simpler and much more alarming. We sold you this car, but we still control it. And that message, once people heard it, did not go away at the time Bugatti was fighting Mat Armstrong's rebuild. The company had a very powerful backer standing behind it. Porsche, one of the most respected and financially powerful car companies in the world, owned 45% of Bugatti Rimac. That stake gave Bugatti's position a kind of heavyweight credibility. When Bugatti said that their approach to independent repair was about safety and brand protection, there was a German automotive giant nodding quietly in agreement behind them. Porsche's philosophy around brand prestige, quality control, and protecting intellectual property aligned closely with Bugatti's hardline stance. Together, They represented exactly the kind of institutional weight that could make a self-taught mechanic from Leicester feel very small indeed. And then, in April 2026, Porsche sold its stake and walked away. The official reason was that Porsche needed to focus on its core business. That sounds like a polite corporate phrase, and it is, but the financial reality behind it was stark. Porsche's profits had collapsed by an almost unbelievable 92.7%. A company that had been one of the most profitable car manufacturers in the world was suddenly fighting for its own financial survival. Walking away from Bugatti was not a philosophical decision. It was a survival move. But the timing of that exit, coming right in the middle of the ongoing battle over Mat Armstrong's rebuild, sent a message that Porsche almost certainly did not intend to send. The fortress that stood behind Bugatti's refusal, the billion-dollar parent company that had given weight to every safety argument, every institutional blockade, every part's refusal, had just quietly packed up and left. And as someone put it perfectly in an online comment that spread around the car community like wildfire, the fortress turned out to be a house of cards. With Porsche gone, Bugatti was suddenly standing alone in a fight that had already made the company look bad to millions of people. And into that exact moment, with the dust still settling in Bugatti, trying to figure out what came next, Lamborghini decided to speak. You have to understand what Lamborghini's position meant before you can understand why their CEO's statement hit so hard. Lamborghini is not a distant outsider commenting on someone else's drama. They are a direct competitor. They build hypercars of comparable rarity and comparable price. Their vehicles are hand-built, extraordinarily complex, and sold to the same kind of ultra-wealthy buyers who treat cars as investments as much as vehicles. They face the same pressures around brand protection and reputation management. Like Bugatti, they are a European hypercar manufacturer. Like Bugatti, they have historically been very protective of their brand and their intellectual property after a car leaves a factory. And like Bugatti, they are part of the Volkswagen Group family, the same corporate conglomerate that previously owned Bugatti and whose philosophy around brand prestige has shaped how these companies think about independent repair for decades. So when Lamborghini CEO chose to comment on the Mat Armstrong situation, they were not speaking from the cheap seats. They were speaking from inside the same world. The statement itself was delivered during an industry interview that was not expected to generate headlines. But the words that came out were clear, direct, and impossible to ignore. The CEO said that independent enthusiast repair of high-end vehicles represented something the industry needed to engage with rather than resist. They said that the conversation Mat Armstrong had forced into the public domain was a legitimate one. And they said that Lamborghini believed that documentation, transparency, and genuine engagement with the independent repair community was a more sustainable path forward than institutional blockades and parts blacklists. Read that again slowly. A CEO of a brand that competes in exactly the same market, builds cars of exactly the same kind of complexity, and faces exactly the same kinds of brand protection pressures, just stood up and said publicly that what Bugatti had been doing was the wrong approach. The phones in Motium, Bugatti's headquarters in France, did not stop ringing. The question that every person paying close attention to the story immediately asked was, why Lamborghini? And why now? On one level, the timing makes complete strategic sense. Porsche had just exited, stripping away the institutional credibility that had backed Bugatti's position. Mate Rimac was now holding full operational control of a company whose public image had taken serious damage. A new group of investors led by a New York firm called HOF Capital was asking questions about Bugatti's direction. The company was at its most vulnerable point in years. Into that gap, Lamborghini stepped forward with a very clear message. And you have to ask, was this calculated? Was this a rival brand sensing an opportunity and moving to take advantage? Or was this something more genuine? A company that actually holds a different philosophy about what a car manufacturer's relationship with its owners should look like? The honest answer is probably both, and there is nothing wrong with that. You can genuinely believe that independent repair of complex vehicles is the right position, and you can also recognize that your biggest competitor has created a massive PR disaster that gives you the perfect moment to publicly look enlightened by comparison. Those two things do not cancel each other out. Smart companies take principled positions at moments when taking those positions is also good strategy. But the more skeptical voices in the automotive community raise, a fair point. Lamborghini has a luxury of making these statements because they have never been tested. No wrecked Lamborghini has become a high-profile rebuild saga. Their vents have not been locked. Their parts availability has not been stress-tested by a mechanic, with millions of subscribers watching every step. Making a principled statement when you have not had to pay the price for that principle is relatively easy. The real test will come the day a crashed Huracan shows up in someone's workshop, and that someone starts asking Lamborghini for parts. But here is what matters about the statement, even if you are skeptical of it. Lamborghini said it publicly. They put their brand's name on the side of openness over blockades. Walking back a public corporate statement is enormously difficult. The press holds you to it. Your customers hold you to it. You said it, and now you have to live with having said it, which means Lamborghini may have just signed themselves up for a policy commitment, whether they fully intended to or not. Let's step back from all the corporate drama for a moment and look at the person at the center of all of it. Because without Mat Armstrong, none of this happens. There is no VIN lockout, no parts blacklist, no Porsche exit becoming a conversation about automotive ethics, no Lamborghini CEO making statements about repair philosophy. All of that traces back to one man in a Leicester workshop who looked at a destroyed $6 million car and said yes. Mat Armstrong is not a lobbyist. He is not a policy advocate. He does not have a PR team or a communication strategy. He did not set out to start a movement or change an industry or make Bugatti look bad. What he had was a set of skills built over years of working on cars that most people had given up on, a camera to document what he was doing, and an audience that had watched him turn the impossible into the routine enough times to believe he could do it again. And then he started to do it, when he separated the Chiron's front end from the rear. Something Bugatti had said could only be done in 2 places in the entire world. He did it on camera. When he spent 60 hours fabricating a replacement front crash bar without a factory reference scan, he showed every step of the process. When he sourced airbags from an Audi A3 that happened to share part numbers with Bugatti originals and figure out how to make them work in one of the most exclusive cars ever built, he documented the whole thing. And when the engine fired for the first time since the Miami crash, and that sound filled his Leicester workshop, millions of people heard it. That is not just a YouTube series. That is evidence. It is a real-world demonstration, documented in granular detail and watched by an enormous audience, of what skill and persistence and creative problem-solving can achieve when a corporate machine tries to make something impossible. The extraordinary irony of this whole story is that by trying so hard to stop Mat Armstrong, Bugatti gave his work a significance it would never otherwise have had. If they had sold him the parts and wish him luck, it would have been a great YouTube series about fixing a rare car. By fighting him at every step, they turned it into something that made the whole world pay attention. What Lamborghini CEO said and what Mat Armstrong's rebuild represents are both part of a much bigger conversation that the automotive industry has been trying to avoid for years. The right to repair is not a new idea. It has been fought and won and lost in other industries before cars ever became the battleground. In agriculture, John Deere spent years refusing to let farmers repair their own tractors using independent mechanics or third-party parts. The argument was about software, about proprietary systems, about safety and warranty concerns. It sounded very familiar to what Bugatti said about the Chiron. And eventually, after years of legal pressure, regulatory attention, and a public opinion battle that Deere consistently lost, the company had to change its approach. In consumer electronics, Apple fought independent iPhone repair for years, arguing that third-party repairs compromised device safety and integrity. The technical arguments were not entirely wrong, but the optics were disastrous. Watching a trillion-dollar company try to stop a local repair shop from fixing a cracked screen did not play well with the public. And eventually the political and commercial costs of maintaining that position became greater than whatever benefit Apple was getting from it. The car industry, and especially the high-end car industry, is heading toward exactly the same collision. The technical arguments manufacturers make about complex vehicles are more serious than the ones made about tractors or phones. A Bugatti Chiron is not an iPhone. The safety implications of a poorly rebuilt hypercar traveling at high speed are genuinely significant, but the fundamental dynamic is the same. When you buy something, when you hand over your money and receive a product in return, there's a basic human expectation that you own that thing, The idea that a manufacturer can continue to control what you do with your property after the sale is complete is one that most people find deeply uncomfortable, and that discomfort is not going away. If anything, the combination of Mat Armstrong's rebuild and Lamborghini statement has accelerated a conversation that was already moving toward regulation. Courts and legislatures across Europe and North America are beginning to look at right-to-repair questions in the automotive sector. The story that started with a crashed Chiron at a Miami auction is feeding directly into that regulatory discussion. One part of the story has not received nearly enough attention, and it might turn out to be the most important part of all. When Porsche sold its stake in Bugatti Rimac, it did not sell to another car company. It sold to a consortium led by a New York-based investment firm called HOF Capital. HOF Capital is not a company that most people in the car world would recognize, but in the technology world, it is well known. Their investment portfolio includes stakes in SpaceX and Anthropic, the artificial intelligence company, and in Epic Games. Those are not automotive companies. They are technology companies built on entirely different principles to the ones that have governed how car companies like Bugatti have operated for decades. Think about what that means for a moment. The institutional conservatism that backed the VIN lockout, that supported the parts blacklist, that provided the philosophical underpinning for Bugatti's refusal to engage with Mat Armstrong. That conservatism came from a German automotive establishment with decades of experience managing luxury brand prestige through scarcity, exclusivity, and tight control. Volkswagen Group, Porsche, the traditional European car industry. These are organizations that think about brand value in a very specific way. They believe that controlling the narrative around your products, even after those products have been sold, is essential to maintaining the prestige that justifies the price. HOF Capital does not think like that. A company that invests in SpaceX and Anthropic is oriented toward long-term technology growth, toward companies that understand the relationship between community engagement and brand value, toward businesses that see transparency and openness as strategic assets rather than threats. The idea that a YouTube mechanic documenting an independent rebuild is a threat to Bugatti's brand, rather than an extraordinary piece of free advertising for just how remarkable Bugatti's engineering is, would sound completely different to a SpaceX investor than it sounds to a Volkswagen board member. Whether this philosophical difference translates into actual changes in how Bugatti operates under its new ownership structure remains to be seen, but the conditions for change are now present in a way they simply were not 6 months ago. The old money with old instincts is gone. The new money has different ideas. And Mat Rimac himself has said publicly more than once that his opposition to the Armstrong rebuild was institutional rather than personal. Remove the institution. What is left? None of this is comfortable for Bugatti. Let's be honest about the position they are in right now. They have a brand new ownership structure that is still settling into place. They have a CEO dynamic with Mat Rimac, now holding full control of a company that has just lost its most powerful corporate backer. They have new investors from a world, the New York technology investment scene, that thinks about brand management in a fundamentally different way to the German automotive establishment that previously called the shots. They have a half-rebuilt Bugatti Chiron being documented weekly by a man whose subscriber count grew significantly during the exact period Bugatti was trying to shut him down. And they have a major competitor, a brand that plays in the same market, builds cars of the same complexity, and commands the same level of respect, publicly saying that Bugatti's approach to independent repair was wrong. The people inside Bugatti who pushed hardest for the parts blacklist, who backed locking the VIN, who provided the machinery behind the refusal to engage, those people are having a very difficult time right now, because the world is now measuring their decisions against a very different standard than the one they were using when they made them. And the choice Bugatti has to make in the coming months is genuinely painful in either direction. If they double down on the safety argument, if they maintain the position that only Bugatti-sanctioned repair is acceptable, they are doing so knowing that Lamborghini has just publicly put themselves on the other side of it. Every week, Mat Armstrong publishes a new video,